Hello students, I'm Himani Sharma, your UGC NET Paper 1 educator. As we have brought this new program, a 30-day program, the last lap for you all, we will be moving forward and commencing the new topics that we have for the research aptitude, right? So first of all, before even jumping onto the video, as you know, the key features of these 30-day programs are that we will all be covering the concepts by practicing the PYQs. So the focus will be on the entirety of the PYQs, but also you getting the revision, the last minute revision that you all require only on the important concepts, right? Which does not mean that you should not cover the unimportant concepts, but for brushing up your skills, polishing them, and memorizing all those concepts, it's really important for you to revise those things. So with these lectures, with these YouTube videos, you all will be able to achieve that very goal, right? So moving forward, the first question that we have here is from the types of statistical scales that we have in research, right? So read the question here. In which of the following scales of measurements, the properties of classification and order both are present, right? So you are supposed to answer where we find these two characteristics always. Is it nominal, is it ordinal, interval, or ratio? You can pause your video whenever you see a question and answer it on your own and then play it again to see if you were correct, right? So moving forward to the answer, we have the answer as option B. So basically, what do we have as scales? We have four kinds of scales: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So first of all, if we talk about the names of these various scales, why are these scales used? These scales are used for the statistical part. If a researcher wants to do certain stats, wants to do certain measurements and all, those measurements can be achieved by using these very scales, right? The way as we measure certain things with the usage of a particular physical scale that we have, the measurement scale that we have in mathematics, same is the case with these four types of scales, but for taking a sample or measuring certain things using these very statistical scales that we have in research, so that we can get the characteristics or the outcome and measurement accurately, right? So first of all, we have nominal. Now when we talk about the nominal scale here, N stands for nominal and it also stands for naming, which means that this scale obviously is the first scale, and mind you, you all are supposed to memorize these very scales in this order only: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio, right? So coming back again to what we have in nominal we name certain things, we label them, right? So labeling and naming is done in nominal scale. Let us just say for an example that there are 4 or 5 cars on a racetrack, right? On a racing track. So I have named them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Correct? This does not mean that the person or the driver or the car number 1 which is there is the superior of them all. No, we are just here labeling things. We are just here naming things. Even for that matter, if there are roll numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in class, that does not mean that roll number 1 is the one which stands first or who is superior to all the students in the class. So, the basic function of a nominal scale in research is just to name things. Correct? Also, another more thing that I would like to tell you guys is that whenever we will be moving forward, and this is why I say that you are supposed to memorize them in this order only, whenever we will be moving forward from one scale to the other will have one unique characteristic of its own, right? Plus the characteristic of a previous scale. So here we had naming. So ordinal scale will have naming plus its own characteristic that is there. Coming to the interval will have two characteristics, whatever characteristics that we have of the ordinal, that will be name and order, plus its own characteristic. Correct? Now coming again to the ordinal scale. If we talk about ordinal scale, the answer lies in the name itself. Ordinal means order or ranking. So this scale basically ranks certain items, right? So how will that be an example? For instance, only if I said that first, second and third. I am taking 3 students who stood first, second and third in the midterms, etc. Correct? So the name of the first person was Risha, right? The name of the second person was Nandini, correct? Nandini. And the name of the third person was Amrit. So if I say that these 3 people are there, right, what I'm doing? I'm placing them in an order, correct? Hence, the characteristic of ordinal is here, that is order is here, and I'm naming them as well. And I named them what? First, second and third. So you have the same, you see here the ranking is being done and we have the naming as well. So ranking plus naming will be here. Correct? Moving forward with the third kind of scale that we have, it is interval scale. In an interval scale, you all must have in your mathematics of 9th and 10th class, you all must have done certain, things which were related to the class interval like 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, etc. Which showed that the difference between all these three parts is the same, which is 10, 10, 10. Moving to the definition of an interval scale will have the characteristics of ordinal scale plus its own characteristics. So here in interval, we have, fixed intervals. The first of all, we'll be talking about the unique characteristic. The fixed intervals are there, which means that same, 10, 10 and 10 differentiation, the interval is fixed there, correct? Hence, it is named as an interval scale. Coming to naming and ordering part, so these are the 3 characteristics of this interval scale. 2 of the ordinal, right? And 1 its unique characteristic. Correct? So let's just see first of all. I have drawn this very thing for you all. So it is named, right? Named 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. It is put in an order 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30. And it has a fixed interval of 10. So we see the characteristics of 3 scale, the scale, interval scale, the 3 characteristics that we talked about here, the name, order and interval, all 3 are present here. We have named it, we have, put it in a ranking. We have also mentioned that there is an equal interval which is there, which is fixed. One more characteristic that we have in the interval scale is that here 0 is arbitrary. 0 is arbitrary. Now, when I say that, let's just take for an instance, let us just talk about the 0 degree Celsius. 0 degree Celsius. Sorry. Cut. Aap mat karna bhaiya. So, let us just talk about this as an example. 0 degree Celsius. Correct? If I talk about this temperature, it means that 0 does not mean null, that there is no temperature here. 0 here holds a value of not being 0. So 0 is not 0 here. Hence, it is arbitrary. It will change. It will, change according to what is required. So here, if I type 0 degrees Celsius, the temperature was 0 to 10 degrees Celsius and 10 to 12 degree, 10 to 20 and 20 to 30. So what I have done there, that 0 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, right, that holds a value. And this 0 is not 0 here. It is arbitrary. Take another thing for an instance. We talk about size 0. if we talk about, right? So size 0 does not mean that there are no size 0 clothes available. It does not mean that no clothes are available. Size 0 here means the clothes which are for newborn babies or infants. Correct? So you see here 0 will not stand here as 0 but something other, right? Moving forward with the fourth type of scale that we have here, it is ratio. So ratio will have the characteristics of the previous scale, which was that interval scale. You are correct. So we will have name, order, right? We will have an interval here, but here the 0 will mean 0 only. So the characteristic, the unique characteristic that ratio has here is that 0 is an absolute 0. It is not arbitrary. Correct? So it has the characteristics of naming, ordering, right, and standing as in 0 to 10 and 0 to 20. So let us just again take for example, if there are 50 students in the class or 60 students in the class, right, and I am naming them 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40 and 40 to 50. So here you see I have named them, but here unlike the 0 degrees Celsius that we talked about as the temperature part, here 0 will stand for 0 only. Correct? So here naming is done, here order is achieved, here interval is also there, and here we have the ratio that we have, that is the 0, the absolute 0. Correct? So I hope this thing is also clear to you. So now we will be having certain questions related to these scales only, and with this concept, with this explanation, I think that things would have been clear to you and you all will be able to answer those questions perfectly, right? So I have this chart here. Nominal is named variables, as I told you. Ordinal, named plus order or ranking. It is also known as a ranking scale. Interval, where we have naming, ordering and proportionate intervals between variables, equal fixed intervals. In ratio, name, order, interval and absolute 0, that I already have talked about in a descriptive manner in the last 3 or 4 slides, right? Moving to the next question that we have here, which scale is the simplest form of measurement, right? Where you don't have to mustly, calculate anything. Which is that scale? The answer to this question is D. What do we have D as option? Nominal scale. Now, when we say nominal scale is the simplest form of measurement, why do I say that? Because of the fact that here you are just going to name things. And you do not have to perform any calculative functions. You do not have to think of a fixed 0. You do not have to think of a, equal and fixed interval, right? Or an order that is to be achieved. You are just going to name things randomly. Correct? So this is the simplest form of measurement as a scale. Then there is this list which is there. You are supposed to, cross-check them, and then we have the options in the next slide. So try to see which one fits here and try to choose the option in the next slide based on that very thing. Right? So pause your videos, see what is the answer and look for the options that you think is correct from here. Right? So moving forward, the answer to this question is option D. And what do we have as option D? A stands for classification only. B stands for ordinal, that is classification. B stands for 1 only. C stands for 2, right? And D stands for 3, which I already have talked about in the previous slide. So I think this concept would have been crystal clear to you all, because match the followings are the types of questions which are asked in these statistical scales. Coming back, nominal, we already have talked about. Classification, because just naming is done here. Ordinal scale, classification and order, right? Because you are ranking things. Interval, classification, order and equal units or equal intervals. Ratio, classification, order, equal units and an absolute 0. Correct? So I think you all are confident enough now to crack if any question comes from these, 4 types of scales which are there. Coming to the next question that we have here. A researcher studies the effect of peer group interaction, that is the friends or, that the people we have near in our schools, etc. Peer group interaction on learning styles. The variable, which is learning style, in this study functions as which kind of variable? Is it independent, dependent, controlled, or intervening variable? Pause the video, think of something, think of an answer, see and look where the answer lies in the question itself, right? The answer we have here is option B, which is the dependent variable. Correct? So, before even reading this very thing, let me just tell you in simple terms what is independent variable and what is dependent variable. When we talk about independent variable, it is the one which is known as the cause of something. And the dependent variable is known as the effect of something. Correct? So whenever you see that a particular thing is having an effect, so the effect will be termed as the dependent variable because it is depending on the change in the independent variable. One more thing that I would like to add here is, which has been asked multiple times in the previous year questions, right? Was it which variable is the one which is manipulated every time? It is the independent variable. Now, if I say manipulated, seems like a heavy word here, right? But the concept here is easier. If I tell you that you are the one, or let's just take smoking again as an example. Smoking causes lung cancer. So what is the independent variable here first of all? The independent variable is smoking. And the dependent variable here is lung cancer. Now, when I say independent and dependent, we'll try to look at the word manipulation here from this perspective. If I say that a person smokes 50 or 60 cigarettes per day, the health of that very person's lungs will be deteriorated, drastically, and he or she will have lung cancer. Correct? Sounds good, right? We are getting to know the, difference that we have in the independent and dependent variable. Coming back here, smoking causes lung cancer. So if you try to see that if I reduce the number of cigarettes of me smoking per day, right, as a person who smokes, right? So if I reduce the number of cigarettes I smoke per day, the chances of me having lung cancer at the earlier stage will be less. So the more the manipulation in the variable, the more the dependent you will depend on seeing what changes are there. Right? So also, for instance, if you take coffee intake, right? If you love coffee, right? You have coffee, that will have an effect on your sleeping pattern, because if a person has more caffeine, obviously he or she is supposed to be awakened most of the times, right? Rather than, the usual time that we have. Coming back again, if I start, taking coffee in a lesser amount, obviously my sleep will be affected. So the effect here will be the dependent variable always, but the manipulation will always be done by the experimenter or the researcher on the dependent variable to see if I change this very thing, does it have an effect on that very thing, the dependent variable? If there is none, then we will see if there are other variables which are there. Correct? Reading the explanation here. Learning style is a person's natural preference or way of learning. There are different learning styles like verbal, auditory, mathematical, visual, spatial, etc. Now, we were talking about the dependent variable, and it depends on the independent variable that appears, disappears, or varies as the experimenter introduces, removes, or varies the independent variable. So, multiple times if you will modify the independent variable, you will see the effect on the dependent variable again. right? So the dependent variable here that we have here is the measure of the person's behavior of the subject. So if you look at the question here, a researcher studies the effect of what? Peer group interaction on what? On learning styles. Now, if I see from here, right, you all will be able to see that peer group interaction, if we talk about here, we are seeing the effect of peer group interaction on the dependent variable, that is learning styles. So now you're able to make sense that how learning style and why learning styles is the dependent variable here, right? Moving forward with the next question that we have here. The next question says, there are two statements, right? One is named as assertion, the other is the reason. Read it carefully. Randomization is the best method of controlling the effect of extraneous variables in research. Reason being, it results in the equal spread of effect of most of the extraneous variables. So pause your videos again and I'll keep on reminding you, when reading such a question, you are supposed to think a little, slower and be a little more comprehensive so that you know what you are reading and what could be the possible answer here. The answer here that is correct is the option A, which is both A and R are correct and true, and R, that is reason, is the correct explanation of the assertion. How? Let's just see here. First of all, what are extraneous variables? Extraneous variables are basically the variables which the researcher does not want to, measure and all, right? Which are not intentionally studied in any experiment or test. So these are extra variables. Just remember this through these words. Extraneous variables have some other factors which are extra in nature and that are affecting the outcome, right? Affecting the dependent variable. In experiments, the impact of independent variable, as we talked about, is seen on the dependent variable. Sometimes some other variables also influence the result of the experiment. They are called extraneous variables. Take, for example, a test is going to happen, correct? And the teacher did not tell the students, and they came in the class and there was a surprise test. Some of them were shocked, some of them were panicked that I don't know, I haven't studied, I know I'm going to score 0 in this very class, right? So those variables, even if you wanted to see the test, any topic, let's just talk about probability here in mathematics. You wanted to see that how many of them understood the probability chapter and you took a test. So probability and their, skills which are there, let's just say the skills or understanding of the chapter. Correct? So you want to observe the effect of your teaching probability chapter on the understanding of the students. But when you suddenly introduced some surprise test there, the students were panicked, some of them did not understand the chapter and they did not raise their voice up there, right? So what we had here as an extraneous variable, the extra variable could be, them being panicked. And now, being a person who's being panicked here because he or she does not know the concepts clearly, will obviously have an effect of their scores, on their scores basically. So that the scores will be deteriorated, the scores will be less in number, right? Because the person was panicked, the person did not understand the concept properly. So these things, these extraneous variables were not being measured intentionally by the researcher, correct? But they still had an effect on the person's choice and the scores which were there. So you're getting my point? That these variables are the extra variables which affect and which we do not want to measure directly, right? And now the second statement, if we read, let me just read it from here. What is randomization? Randomization is when we will be talking about certain questions which are related to sampling techniques, or if you have studied sampling techniques on your own, you would have come across this very statement, random, right? In probability sampling, we have randomization, which is there, which is every individual is getting an equal chance. Every participant is getting an equal chance of being selected. So if we talk about the randomization here, if I'll be choosing participants, if I'll be choosing certain questions on a random manner, right, and the students are aware that the test is going to happen, but I'm choosing certain random questions which are there, that makes a chance there that the students were, told prior that a test is going to happen, and now, but they are aware that the test was going to happen, and now they have studied, and that will happen, that will have an effect on the students' score. So we have controlled an extraneous variable here. How? By telling the students and through the randomization method that you are going to pose questions which are from that very chapter only, but spread out randomly there. Correct? Random sampling is a part of a sampling technique in which each sample, as I told you, has an equal probability of being chosen. One way to control the extraneous variable is by random sampling. You are choosing only the questions, or you are choosing only the samples, right, randomly, out of nowhere. Correct? Random sampling does not eliminate any extraneous variables, but it only ensures it is equal between all groups. Right? So all the students will be given the same questions, right? The extraneous variables would not directly be controlled here, but we will try to do it with the usage of randomization. Correct? Hence, both of them are correct. The next question that we have here is, which of the following is an independent variable in teaching learning process? Right? Student, institution, teacher, or parents? Pause the video, see what is the answer here. And by now, I think you all will be able to crack what we have here as an answer. So, the answer here we have for this question is C, independent variable. Now, let us just take here for instance only. The teacher teaches. So, a teaching method here is the one which is independent. If she changes the teaching method from group lectures, from traditional methods, she started using visual aids, etc. And she sees that the student learning is improved with the most using the visual aids which were there. And where is she observing the effect? She is observing the effect on the students, which are the dependent variables. Dependent on whom? Dependent on the teacher for the teaching purposes and on the teacher's teaching styles. So here teacher and identifies as the independent variable. And in the last slides, as I told you, manipulation is done with the independent variable only. So you will see that if the teacher manipulates, changes, modifies, alters the teaching methods, those will have an effect on the students' learning skills as well. Correct? So they have asked here us about the independent variable in the teaching and learning process. So obviously the teacher is the independent one and the student is the dependent one. Correct? Then we have a next question. In a research study, the variable which is not directly observable but whose effect is inferred on the dependent variable is termed as. Pause your screens, try to look up for the answer, try to see what you make out of this very question. The answer to this question is option C, intervening variable. Now, do not get confused between these two types. Extraneous variables are the extra variables which are there, right? But intervening variables, if we talk about, intervening, if I tell you that you are intervening in the conversation, it means that you are being in the middle of the conversation, right? It means, and it is also known as mediator variables, which come in the middle. So if I tell you that there is this teacher, right, teaching, right, and here we have an intervening variable. We will talk about it. And here we have the dependent variable, which are the students. So we are taking these variables as hypothetical because they are not directly observed, and they are the effects of these variables are not being directly observed by the researcher. Hence, they are hypothetical. They are just imaginary in nature. Now, if I tell you that if a teacher is teaching in English, the medium, the language that is being used by the teacher is English, and the effect is seen on the student, that the teaching has a good impact on the students because of the teaching language which is being used there. Correct? So English here becomes the intervening variable which is there. Correct? You can say, you can jot down some other examples if you find any for the mediator variables on your own. So if you have any example of the mediator variable, comment down below and let me know your example of an intervening variable. Correct? Then let's just read here. Is a hypothetical variable used to explain causal links between other variables. So here we are seeing the cause of this very teaching on the students, but how? Using the and seeing the hypothetical variable, that is the intervening variable, the language. Intervening variables cannot be observed in an experiment because you are just going to see the effect of teaching style on the students and not the teaching in English on the students. Correct? For example, there is an association between being poor and having a shorter lifespan. Here you go. I have also given you one more example. You will let me know in the comment section if you have any examples of any example that comes in your mind and ask me that is that an example of an intervening variable. Coming back again to the example that we have here, being poor and having a shorter lifespan. These two things are not directly related. If a person is poor, how can you say that the person's lifespan is short? The intervening or the mediator variable here would be poor health condition, right? Or no nutrition, no nutritious food, right? Or worse health or healthcare issues, etc. Right? All of these are the ones. So here we have this one as the independent variable, this one as the intervening variable, and this one as the dependent variable. So we are not directly observing this effect. We are seeing that if a person is poor, he or she will have a shorter lifespan, but there are other factors which are there, right? What are those? Those are known as the intervening or the mediator variables that we have. Next question that I have for you is, a university teacher plans to study the effect of level of aspiration of students in terms of their socio-economic background on their scholastic performance at the term end evaluation by an external testing agency. So many heavy words. Do not get confused. We can break this question down. But first of all, you try to answer me. What would be the answer here? Right? What is the dependent variable in the experiment or the study? The answer here is option C. Now let me just break down the question for you in 3 or 4 parts. The effect of level of aspiration of students, right? We are going to see how aspiration plays an important role on what? On the students' scholastic performance at the term and evaluation. Right? So we from here have already identified the independent and dependent variable, that if the level of aspiration in students is, greater, they are going to achieve good scores in their tests or in the term and evaluation. But if a student is, a little aimless and he or she is less aspired, then only he will not score that good in the term and examination. Correct? So we are seeing the effect of aspiration on the student's score. This thing which they have given here is extraneous. Or maybe this is not even extraneous, we can say. This is just because of the sake that they might wanted to confuse you using certain heavy terminologies, heavy words which are there, vocabulary, right? So you all need to break down the question in pieces to see what is the answer there. So we have the independent variable here. and the dependent variable here. So there you go. Your answer lies for the dependent variable, the effect on the scholastic performance of students. Correct? Then we have these very things. So thus, just for the revision part, independent, we have talked about that it is the cause and it will always be manipulated. Correct? Means it will always be changed. Dependent variable is the effect of something. Effect of the changes made in the independent variable. Intervening, the mediator variables, which are hypothetical in nature. So you can jot these things down as one-liners as well. Extraneous or confounding, and yes, extraneous variables are also known as confounding variables because they confuse the entire process, because they do not let the other person, whosoever is experimenting, to see if the panic that was created because of the surprise test had the negative impact, or it was just the, that the student did not know the concept well. So it tries to confuse, hence extra factors having impact on DV, which means dependent variable. Control variables are the ones which need to be controlled at some point of time, right? These were not the ones which were included in the questions, but just for your sake this is being done, right? So the ones which can be controlled under certain conditions. We have done the example of two plants, one with the fertilizer and one without fertilizer, to see if the fertilizer has the effect on the plant. But the other conditions between the same plants are controlled, right? So here no changes are made. Controlled factors. Coming to the quantitative variables, the quantitative variables are the ones which measure certain things. Categorical, which see certain categories like average, below average, etc. So these are certain categories which are there. Latent variables, polytomous variables and constant variables. These are certain minor variables which are there, right? So you are supposed to, this is a question for you as well again, right? So tell me in the comment section if any one of you, because this is a type of variable, I will be talking about this variable in the next video as well. But for the very first time, I'll be asking you, what do you all mean through this very variable? What do we mean by a latent variable? But I'll explain the other two as well here. Polytomous variable. So the another thing that I want to explain for you all is the polytomous variables. For the latent part, you will be letting me know in the comment section below. Polytomous variables are the one which have more than one category. Right? So if we talk about the students in their bachelor's, master's, etc., but they are the part of, if we even talk about primary or pre-primary school education, these have certain classes which are there, right? So more than one category which is there. Constant variables are the one which are not even changed, not changed. Correct? So I will reply in the comment section if you answer me about the latent variable and the question that I asked in the previous slides as well. We will be moving forward with certain more important concepts in the upcoming videos. Till then, stick with us, keep on studying, keep on revising the important concepts that we also bring forth for you. So if you have any doubts, you can let me know in the comment section below and I will reply for sure. Till then, keep on studying, keep on smiling. I will meet you again. Thank you so much.